Well, Happy New Year, everyone. With the 26 crop year, we actually have some positive things, at least coming from a cash flow standpoint for you guys, that I'm going to cover quickly in this presentation. So this is going to review what we have coming for disaster money, how to figure your PLC payments that'll be coming this next fall, and some information on the One Big Beautiful Bill stuff. So just really quickly, when that OBB bill passed, the beginning farmer rancher discount increased to 10 years. So if you're have any kids coming back, they get a lot longer discount and a lot deeper discounts in their crop insurance. The PLC price increased on barley from $4.95 to $5.45. I'm going to go through in this example a wheat example, but the barley also looks like it'll trigger now for PLC for the fall. Wheat increased from $5.56 to $6.35. That's going to make a substantial difference in your payout on that for PLC coming this next fall for the 25 crop years. Acres. And then the base acres, we're going to have a one-time chance to increase, which I'm going to cover here on another slide, basically. So then one other big thing, the crop insurance subsidy on ECO and SEO went from 65% up to 80%. That makes those programs a no-brainer to be in. And I really think these are going to be your ad hoc disaster things going forward. So if you're not an ECO and SEO, I would get in those programs on crop insurance. So on the Big Beautiful Bill, one more slide on this. You automatically get the better of the ARC or the PLC program payment for this last crop year. It's a good thing because if any of you guys were in ARC, odds are this PLC program is going to pay way more than what ARC would have paid on most of these wheat base acres at the very least. So for last crop year, you're going to get the higher of the two programs that you're going to get paid on in October of next year, basically. They removed the SEO and ARC rules, so now you could be in ARC and SEO at the same time. There will be reasons for this once the price increases, but for now I'd stay in PLC, which I'll cover later. 100% bonus depreciation for the next 4 years for taxes, that's a good thing, and then some pass-through entity deduction that increased from 20 to 23%, which can be a big deal if you made money on the farm. They'll write off a fair amount of that income before you have to take that on the pass-through. And then the gift tax exemption went from 15 million to 30 million per couple, which probably doesn't matter too much to a lot of you guys. And once again, that section 179 got extended again, so you can do $2.5 million total of that as well. So will we get any disaster money? That's really what the foundation of this presentation is, and I'm going to walk you through what you're going to get and then how to calculate it or where this comes from. So 23 and 24 could go down as two of the largest declines in net farm income ever. 25 will follow that, I think, especially if you exclude livestock. So because of that, the government needs to inject some money into this thing. We're really having a tough time, especially with the input providers and dealerships and stuff are taking a pretty major hit as farmers are running out of money. So we all need a cash injection down the line here. So bridge payments for the 25 crop year, I'm going to go through how that's going to work. They just released the payment rates. And then big PLC payments coming next fall. So I'm going to take you through how to calculate your PLC payments for your farm. So here's the payment rates for this Farm Bridge Assistance Program. This is the one that they just passed in December. You're supposed to have your acres squared up at the FSA by the 19th of December, and then this is going to pay off of what your reported acres were for 2025. So the payment rate right now for barley is going to be $20.51. I should just mention that these were all based off of what they figured for net losses on these crops, and then they paid a percent of the net loss that the crop potentially has. So the deeper the loss the crop had when they did the survey stuff or the budgeting on this program, the more of a payment these crops got. Chickpeas, $33.36 for the smalls and $26 for the largest. So the small chicks actually will get a little bigger payment than the large chickpeas. The lentils, $23.98. Then the smooth green and yellow peas, $19.60. So if you're a barley and pea guy, you're averaging around $20 an acre here. You're going to see the wheat now, as I pop this up in this slide, is $39.35. That's because the wheat price has gotten so low and it's a pretty expensive crop to grow. There's substantial losses for wheat producers. So almost a $40 an acre payment on the wheat. Other caveat on this is that I cannot find anywhere, and I've read multiple articles on this now too, where it talks about how these payments are going to be factored at all. So you should be able to expect this amount of payment, that many dollars per acre times however many acres of that crop you seeded in 25. And then the canola is $23.57, flax is only $8, and then mustard $23. So that pretty well covers the crops that we have to deal with here. There are some rules though with this program. So there's a $155,000 payment limit. If you're a decent sized farm, obviously at $40 an acre on wheat, you could reach that pretty quickly. You do have a $155,000 payment limit. That is by entity. So it's not necessarily if your corporation has 2 people underneath the corporation, the corp still just has this $155,000 payment limit. It does still appear, there's no crop insurance linkage required on this, and that partnerships and joint ventures, I think, would still qualify for multiple payment limits, the way I read this. So if you're a partnership, and you have 2 people underneath the partnership or 2 entities, those 2 entities then would qualify for $155,000 separate payment limits. Where if you're in a pass-through entity like a S Corp or something, you're going to be stuck with this 155 limit. It does look like in the big beautiful bill stuff that that's going to change possibly for 26 for some of the other programs where the pass-through entities might get treated more like partnerships, but we'll know more about that here in the near future, I think. Then payments are scheduled for delivery on this program in February. So you figure out what roughly your payment will be. That's really simple on this program. Just look at that previous chart, take that times the number of acres of that crop that you seeded last year times your share, add those all up, and that should be what your payment is. You're capped at $155,000 per entity, unless you're a partnership, like I said, and then I think you can drill down to multiple entities underneath it. So how about SDRP? We're actually in stage 2 of that program. Most of you that had crop losses in 23 and 24, if you have losses on all your crops, you're not going to qualify for this. This is for crops that didn't pay in stage 1. This is what I call the I almost had a crop insurance loss program, basically. So if you got an exceptional crop in 23 or 24 on a commodity, you're not going to get paid in this. But if you're one of those guys that was like, gosh, I got right down to the edge where my crop insurance is going to pay and it didn't quite pay, this is going to fit you here. So if your yield was between your crop insurance level and the trigger level of this program, which you can see on the side of this slide over here, if you are at the 70% level, this bumps your crop insurance up to 90% for your triggering of this program. There's going to be pre-filled apps at the FSA. Those are kind of hit and miss from what I understand. I'm going to go in and do our own farm one here next week, I hope, and then I'll have better guidance on this. But I have seen some pre-filled ones that it pre-filled with all the numbers on the crops that didn't have losses, or all the units that didn't have losses for you on the pre-filled app. So that's how it should look at the FSA. You should be able to go in there and have them just print an app out pre-filled with your production from the crop insurance side. And it should only list the units or crops that didn't have losses in those crop years for you. Quality discounts can trigger a loss in this program, so that's a little different than the first stage 2. So as you'll see when we go forward in these slides, if you have low protein wheat that caused a price reduction for your wheat, that might drag your production down enough in this program then to trigger a loss. D3 drought, you have to be for most of us, we had to be in a D3 drought anytime during the year, or a D2 8 or more consecutive weeks. As you know, in the first round of this program, excessive heat also qualified, so a lot of people use that for their cause of loss because we did have excessive heat as well. So if you didn't meet the drought qualifications but your yields were low, the excessive heat thing probably would work if you really did have that issue in those years. Hail is one thing that's not included on this, so if you got hailed out, and that's the reason for your yield reduction, you got hail low enough that you would qualify for this stage 2 thing, that's not a quality factor that we can use. So quick example, so you had a 70% crop insurance level. So because you're at the 70% crop insurance level, you would look at this SDRP chart and you'd see they're going to up your coverage to 90% to figure if you're going to trigger a payment or not on this. So we now have 90% coverage on this SDRP program. So they're going to go back and recalculate your loss, basically figuring you're at 90% instead of 70. We're going to say, just for this example, that the base price for wheat for this example in 24 was $6 a bushel, which actually it was, I think, but we're going to use $6 anyways. So you're going to go to the FSA and you're going to ask them to print your app out. They might need some information from you if it doesn't pre-fill your production numbers, and that you can obviously get from us or your insurance agent. So the first page of your app's going to look like this. It's just going to be your information basically with nothing on there that's going to tell you anything about the yields. So when you flip to so you're going to end up with, on the third page of this application, looking where it says Part C, insured crops. And underneath that, it's going to have every unit listed of every crop that you insured, pre-filled with your production numbers. So in this scenario, you're going to see the SDRP liability column, that number 22 for this unit, which we're looking here at unit 401 wheat, which your insurance agent will understand what that is. And it's winter, summer, fall. And the unit measures would be bushels here. So that SDRP liability, that's basically like they went back and recalculated what your total crop insurance liability would have been if we were at 90% instead of at 70%. So that's on this line, $54,000. We're going to say we harvested 10,000 bushels of production. So that's going to be pre-filled off your crop insurance, or it should if it pulls it in there correctly. And then they're going to take that 10,000 bushels times whatever the base price was for the crop insurance for that crop year. So $6 a bushel here for 24 crop year. They're going to say that that production then was valued at $60,000. So $60,000 is more than our $54,000 SDRP liability here. So in this scenario, we wouldn't have an SDRP loss on this line. When these apps print, it's going to print all these lines, and you can go through and hand calculate this if you get these base prices from us. You can go through and hand calculate each line out and see if they're underneath the SDRP liability, and if they are, then you would have a payment on that line. In this example, we wouldn't have a payment on that top line, right? But the next thing that they consider is quality. So we're going to go through what happens on that 10,000 bushels if we have low protein and some falling numbers issues, and that dropped our price we received at the elevator for that. So we harvested 10,000 bushels of winter wheat, the same example we just had. You sold your wheat for $6 a bushel, so you contracted for $6 at the elevator, but you ended up with 8 protein and low falling numbers. So off of that $6, you had $1.50 in discounts. So how this would work on this program is they would take the $6 minus the $1.50 in discounts, and you actually got $4.50 from the elevator cash price then for that because of the discounts. You should have received $6 if your wheat was perfect. So they'll divide the $4.50 into the $6, and you got 75% of what you should have if it was good wheat. So your 10,000 bushels, then they're only going to count 7,500 bushels against you. So I'm going to show you the exact same slide we just went through, demoed on that app, but what happens now when we apply this quality factor. So if you have quality issues, that's where it might trigger this, even if you were kind of at an average crop or slightly above average. If you had some issues, bad falling number stuff, or wheat that went sample grade, but it didn't trigger a crop insurance claim, those kind of things, that's where this would fit. Is you could actually use the quality part to possibly trigger some of this. So we've got the same liability, right? We're on the same app here, $54,000 of liability, but now our 10,000 bushels of production, remember, we're only going to count 7,500 of, because we only received 75% of the price that we should have because of the quality issues. So now they're going to take 7,500 bushels instead of 10,000 times $6 a bushel, which gives us $45,000 worth of value for this one line that we're figuring for the SDRP. So your SDRP payment then would be the $54,000 minus $45,000. That would be your base for your payment. So we have $9,000 base SDRP payment here. So how does my crop insurance figure into this? Well, if you had a crop insurance loss on this stage 2 app, it shouldn't show up there anyways. But the max payout you should have been able to get between SDRP and your crop insurance would have been $12,000. That's the difference between what your crop insurance coverage would have been or was and what the SDRP liability was. What happened here is we ended up with a $45,000 value for the crop on that app for that line. So we qualify for a $9,000 SDRP payment on that one line, but we only get 35% of that paid out. So just like in stage 1, they're going to figure all these payment amounts out for us, but then they're only going to pay 35% of it. And that's all the money they had for this program. So I just wanted to walk you through how to look at the app, how to calculate if you possibly have a loss on it, and then roughly how the payment is figured. But it's not super important you understand all the details. As long as you can get the base prices for those crops, from your crop insurance agent and multiply the production number on there times that base price. If that's underneath that SDRP liability number, you'll have a claim on that line, or you'll get some payment on that line. If it's over it, you won't, unless you have some quality factor to figure it. So moving on to the PLC program, this is one everybody's going to qualify for. Even if you signed up for ARC, you're going to qualify for a PLC payment probably this year, because it's going to pay more than ARC, I think. So this is the only time I've ever heard of that happening, but because they changed things in the middle of the crop year, they're going to give you the better of either ARC or PLC in your county. So how does that work? So every month they release the national average price for all these commodities, and that's what you're seeing here on this chart. So January 15th, roughly, we're going to get another addition to this running average. It runs for wheat and barley, as you can see here, from June 1st to May 31st. So we are about half or a little more into the average. Right now, the average price of wheat in the U.S. is running on average about $5 a bushel, and barley at $5.30. Now they upped the reference prices, as you can see there, to $6.35. Remember, in the big beautiful bill, they increased the reference prices in these commodities, which will greatly increase the payments. So because wheat went to $6.35 a bushel and the national average wheat price right now is only $5, that means we're going to get $1.35 a bushel payment in this PLC program, and I'm going to walk you through how that pays here. So the reason we can be so confident it's going to pay now is because a huge amount of the wheat sales are weighted back at the beginning of the crop year, or the beginning of the crop year, which would be June for wheat. So as you can see, June, July, August, September, all the way up to December, we're already up to 71% historically of the total bushels sold in the U.S. So there's not a lot of bushels left to be sold that would be weighted against the average where it's at currently. Plus, the market's still depressed, and so I'm sure if anything, it's going to increase this payment rate, not decrease it. So here's a quick rundown on how this program would pay. So we have a $6.35 trigger price for wheat now. That was established in that big beautiful bill thing. Our market year average currently is $5 for wheat throughout the nation. So that means we have a $1.35 a bushel payment rate that's triggered now on PLC. I would imagine it's going to end up being really close to this because we're so far into the average. So we have 40 bushel average on this farm. So every farm number you have is going to have a different average yield for the crops that have base acres, and a different number of base acres depending on how much that crop was seeded in the past, basically. So these base acres very well may not equal at all what you're seeding. So farm 1, 2, 3, 4 here, you might have seeded all the peas, but if you have just wheat base, you're going to get paid on wheat in this program, just as a reminder. So your 40 bushel base yield for this farm number times the $1.35 a bushel payment rate equals a $54 an acre payment on those base acres in farm 1, 2, 3, 4 that you have for wheat. So in this example, we're going to say you have 1,000 base acres of wheat on this farm. They're only going to pay on 85% of the base acres in this program. That's just how it works. So you're going to get paid on 850 of those base acres of wheat times that $54 an acre payment rate that we figured on the previous slide. So as you guys can see, for banking or just for your budget purposes, there's some substantial payments coming on this PLC program coming in the fall here for the 25 crop years. Poor prices we're going to get paid here in the fall of 26. So you can put that on your projection for the bank. And there's a lot of banks that didn't even seem to have this on their radar, so that's going to help your budget quite a bit between this and the bridge payment. How do I figure this out? You need to go to the FSA and ask for this form 156EZ. On that form, you're going to see down on the second page, I believe, of the form, it's going to show you the base acres of wheat on this example and base acres of barley for this farm, basically. And every farm number is going to have one of these. So on our wheat down here, you can see we have 110 base acres of wheat. We have a 28 bushel yield. We'd take that 110 times 28 times that $1.35 payment rate for the wheat, then times 85%, because they're only going to pay on 85% of that, and that's how you would figure this out. Barley as well is going to have a payment. It's not a very big one right now, but it's going to be 15 to 20 cents, it looks like, unless on the next few releases of those prices that changes quite a bit. But you can reference those prices in this presentation if you want to. If you go back in those slides, you can see kind of what those base prices were for all the crops, Or if you look up PLC payment rate chart, I believe, in Google, it will pop that up for you as well. What about the base acre increase? So the other thing that passed in that big beautiful bill was the increase in base acres, right? So each farm has total acres, crop acres, and base acres. Any more, usually the cropped acres or if you crop everything in the farm, that's usually way more than what we have for base, because our base acres were established when stuff was more half crop, half fallow. So there's also farms that have no base because it was stripped when when it was put in CRP, it was stripped off and put on another farm number. We're hoping in this program, it looks like they're going to allow us to add base back in those farms as well. It appears that there's probably going to be a cap, like maybe we're only going to be able to add another 30% above what we currently have established for base acres for a farm on farms that already have base included, because the 30 million acres they allocated for the nation does not cover, I think we're short 50 million acres or something potentially as a whole for what gets seeded now. So we're going to be able to add base acres. We're not maybe going to be able to add the total number of acres that we're currently seeding, but we're going to get a chance to increase it. And so that's a positive thing looking forward here. Now, it is important to understand if they give the option of leaving things the way they are or going back and maybe adding base acres, but also having to recertify your yields, because of all the drought years we've been in, it's possible you could be worse off by adding acres but decreasing your yields in these programs. Or it might force you to remix your acres from wheat and barley right now, which wheat's usually the big payer on this program. It might force you to remix it into peas and some of those other crops that we're growing, but you're probably going to be better off keeping your wheat base if they allow it. So it may be possible that increasing your base acres may be not a real positive thing for some of us if they make us improve our yields up at the same time because of the droughts. But we'll just have to wait and see how that turns out, because there is no rule really issued on how they're going to do this yet. Should I consider ARC? So the next thing you're going to have to pick here by March 15th, I think, is whether you're going to be an ARC or PLC. In the past, it was easy not to be an ARC because we couldn't be an ARC and SCO at the same time. But in that bill, they allowed us now to have ARC and SCO stacked on top of each other. For now, I think PLC makes the most sense with this market because we know PLC is going to pay. ARC is triggered by changes in yield in the county and the price. So if we cut good crops in the county but still have these depressed prices, you may not get a payment in ARC. The other thing is the ARC payment is capped at a pretty low level right now because the commodity prices have been so low. So I think the max ARC payment in Toole County, I believe, is $19. So you saw in that example on those previous slides, your PLC payment could easily be $50. So I would stay in PLC until the prices increase and then make that a year-by-year decision. But if we get where the commodity prices are back up considerably above the PLC trigger price, then it makes a lot more sense in my mind to be an ARC than PLC, because at least there's a chance ARC would pay where very unlikely that PLC would. But for now, stay in PLC, in my opinion. And with SCO and ECO on the crop insurance side, that's basically an ARC program, but much better than ARC through crop insurance. So like I said, in 25, you're automatically going to get the better of either one of these programs, so that's a good thing. In 26, you're going to have to pick one, and I would probably stay in PLC if I were you for now. So will SEO and ECO pay in Toole County? I'm going to run these for other counties. I didn't have time for this presentation to go back and run it, but in a county like Teton where there was exceptional drought, you can pretty well assume it's going to probably pay there. Toole County was in a weird situation where there was pretty bad drought up front, then some substantial rains that made for some considerably above average crops for some people. If your crop was already stressed before those rains came, then below average for those people. But as a whole, here's what we came up with in Toole County based off of the yields that have been reported to us. So you can see spring wheat would just barely be into the ECO payment level. Remember, we need to be below 95% for that to start to pay. Winter wheat, the price dropped a little more on. So on winter wheat, probably a bigger payment than spring wheat. It's possible in these programs that you guys will get all of your ECO money in the wheat in Toole County. It's so close right now, I hate to predict anything and have you be disappointed. Barley, similar situation. We're looking at about 90% of average for the yields there. I will say we have, for crop insurance customer base, probably the higher end of the yields for the county. So I think that number might get low enough to trigger a entire ECO payment on the barley. Now, the pulse crops was a surprising one. So the average pulse crop yield for our customer base in Toole County for our agency, which is a pretty good chunk of Toole County, only came in with figuring a price drop in there as well at around 77% of average. So it's possible on the pulse crops we get both the ECO and the SCO money out of that. And then canola was way above average. Our canola yields have been drugged down so bad through these drought years that we are actually, for the yields reported to our agency, are like 200% above what the county's average is for that. So I wouldn't figure a payment on canola. A little wishy-washy on wheat right now, but we'll know in March, or I'm sorry, that's in May, I guess, that we would know for sure on that. And then the barley, pretty good chance you're going to get your ECO money, and then the peas and lentils, pretty good chance that you're going to get all of your SCO and ECO money there, I think. But everything's so close right now, it's easier in extreme droughts, but I think there's going to be some money coming, but it's hard to predict. If you're a cattle guy, please look at using this LRP program to lock in next year's calf prices. That commodity market on the cattle side of things has run actually back up to almost record highs again, where we had lost almost $50 of that. That has to do with some screwworm stuff in Mexico and some tariff concerns and stuff, but this is not going to last forever. And as you can see on this chart, this is just a 2025 chart, the amount of run up we had in that 1 year. Even if we fell back to where 25 started, we would now be losing $1.20 off this market. So if you want to lock this awesome market that we had in this year one more year out, we should do that right now on the calves that are in your cows. And if you're keeping any yearlings over, I would seriously consider using this program to put a bottom on that right now, sooner than later, because who knows, there's a lot going on in the world, and why miss out on the one thing that's profitable? It leaves all the upside, just you give up a little bit of the profit, but it stops the big downside movement on this stuff. So what does we suggest? 75% revenue protection, still the best value in enterprise units. This is just going through your crop insurance stuff, because we're getting to where we're into the March deadline season almost again. Always take ECO and SEO with the new subsidy. I think that's your new disaster program anyways. So if you don't get in that, you might just be SOL next time the disaster stuff comes around. Take PLC at the FSA till the prices rebound. Seriously consider LRP on cattle for 26, and never, ever, ever take YP on a crop unless there's a really good reason for it, which there's very few good reasons to do that. So if you look at your crop insurance stuff and it says YP and not RP next to a crop, please work on getting that changed in the spring. But I'm going to end this on a positive note. Be strong now, because things will get better. It might be stormy, but it can't rain forever. And that's for sure. I think if we made it through 23 and 24, where we really didn't have a serious cash injection from the government and we were in a pretty tough shape then, now they've stepped up all of these support programs where we're going to be getting more money injected from the government, and I think we've got through the worst of it. As long as we can look forward and look at the PLC payments we're going to be getting and then absorb this bridge payment, I think for the bank, if you can add all these payments up, if you guys need help doing this after this presentation, please let me know, but use those for your projection. That bridge payment is coming. The PLC payment is coming. And then seriously look, if you were just on the edge of having a crop insurance loss, look at that SDRP stage 2 stuff here. So anyways, I hope you guys got something out of this. Wanted to kind of show you what was coming for you and how to figure out these disaster programs, and we'll be sure to pass along an update next time something comes along.